Introduction to Critical Care. Part 2. What is critical illness? Welcome back. In the previous tutorial, I introduced the concept of the critical care unit and explained that critical care units are different types of wards that are found in hospitals characterized by high nurse-to-patient ratios and a large multidisciplinary team for looking at the sickest patients in the hospital. I explained the nature of that team and who were the members of that team, and I also talked about why you should use the term ICU rather than ITU. This time I will discuss why patients end up in the ICU and why physiologic reserve is the key component to understanding this. I also discuss risk factors for admission to ICU. Let's start with a clinical scenario. Paddy, who is 73, is admitted to intensive care. Why Paddy? Turns out that Paddy was a member of a family who gathered for an event. Everybody became infected with influenza. Some of the men subsequently developed bacterial pneumonia. Porrick is a 19-year-old student with a history of asthma, and he takes a bronchodilator and steroid inhaler daily. He has no other medical problems. Padder, his father, is 44 years old. He's overweight and he's hypertensive, and he's had asthma since he was a child. His older brother, Podge, is 52. He drinks a lot, has COPD from smoking, has early congestive heart failure, and type 2 diabetes. And the grandfather, Paddy, is 73. He's had asthma all his life and has COPD now. He has hypertension, chronic kidney disease, and a recent history of chronic lymphocytic leukemia. Well, let's see what happens to each one of these people. Porrick, the 19-year-old student, goes to his GP and receives a prescription for oral antibiotics. He ends up in bed for 2 days and is back at college within a week. Padder, 44 years old, is admitted to hospital to a medical ward. He's administered intravenous antibiotics and corticosteroids. He also requires some supplemental oxygen. He is home within 7 days. His older brother, Podge, remember, alcoholic liver disease and COPD, 52 years old, very poor overall health. He's admitted to a hospital with hypoxia and hypercarbia, develops pneumonia, respiratory failure, and pulmonary edema, and he's admitted to high dependency care for IV antibiotics, IV steroids, IV diuretics, and BiPAP, or non-invasive ventilation. Now Paddy, the eldest, the granddad, starts off with high-flow oxygen in addition to all of these other interventions, and then he goes on non-invasive ventilation, then mechanical ventilation and other therapies, and he develops ARDS. Why is it that 4 different people from the same gene pool were infected with the same organisms and had radically different outcomes? It all comes down to the concept of physiologic reserve. If you look at our bodies, we have a number of essential organs. These include the brain and the neurological system, including the spinal cord, the cardiovascular system, the kidneys, the liver, the hematopoietic system, the inflammatory system, the neuroendocrine system, and the lean body mass, or the muscles. If you look at life versus death, you need a certain amount of physiological reserve to stay alive. If there is inadequate reserve to preserve life, then death ensues. If you look at physiologic reserve then with age, and the dashed line on the top of this graph is full reserve. Children build reserve all the way up to adulthood. That's why there are neonatal ICUs and pediatric ICUs, but rarely do you see teenagers and young adults in ICU because they have full reserve. And effectively, that reserve really builds all the way through the 30s and 40s and 50s. There's more than enough reserve, maybe more than you need. And really up till about the age of 60, for the majority of healthy people, they have full physiologic reserve. And then it starts to diminish with age, such that by the time one gets to one's 70s, that reserve has fallen down quite considerably. And then, of course, after 80, it's very marginal. Normal individuals who don't have any concurrent diseases are vulnerable to critical illness before the age of 10 and over the age of 70. And they're particularly vulnerable over the age of 80. However, if one has systemic diseases, and I'll go through these a little bit later on, the vulnerability is increased considerably over all age brackets. And you can see here, with systemic disease, children under the age of 10 are highly vulnerable to critical illness. The reserves diminish massively after the age of 40. So patients are really vulnerable to critical illness in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. And then over the age of 60, highly vulnerable. And then over the age of 70, extremely unlikely to survive critical illness. What systemic diseases reduce physiologic reserve? Well, the big one is cancer. Lung cancer, upper gastrointestinal cancers, liver cancer, ovarian cancer. They have a huge negative impact. Neurologic diseases such as multiple sclerosis, muscular dystrophy, and of course, motor neuron disease. Chronic lung diseases, particularly pulmonary fibrosis, emphysema, and chronic bronchitis, not asthma. Congestive heart failure, particularly associated with ischemic heart disease. Any situation where there's a dilated cardiomyopathy. Any situation where there is a dilated cardiomyopathy and aortic stenosis. End-stage kidney disease caused by anything causes a huge disruption in the body's reserves. Chronic liver disease from any cause, but particularly alcoholism, massively depletes reserves, as does bone marrow failure caused by, for example, leukemia, lymphoma, myeloma, or immunosuppression caused by drugs. Marasmus-like malnutrition that we see with alcoholism, eating disorders, malignancy, and of course, neglect. Now let's look at our family. Podge and his risk factors. He's 52 years old, so that's a positive risk factor. COPD, that's a negative risk factor. Normally at 52, he'd be fine. He'd have a load of reserves. But add in COPD, suddenly that's a negative. Congestive heart failure, that's a negative. Alcoholic liver disease, that's a negative. Type 2 diabetes, possibly a negative. This means that Podge will survive critical illness because he has significant lean body mass and adequate cardiopulmonary and inflammatory reserve. But he's a little bit marginal because he has so many things going on, but he's still young. What about Paddy? Paddy is 73 years old, negative risk factor. Asthma, COPD, negative risk factor. Hypertension, probably not a problem. Chronic kidney disease, risk factor. CLL, risk factor. Paddy is unlikely. Mistake. Paddy is unlikely to survive critical illness because he has reduced. Mistake again. Paddy is unlikely to survive critical illness because he has reduced lean body mass due to his age and reduced cardiopulmonary, renal, and hematological reserve, specifically the latter because of malignancy. Recovery from critical illness requires significant reserve. So if a patient starts off with lower reserve and they become critically ill, well, that reserve gets wiped out and then death will ensue. We start life-sustaining therapies, that keeps the patient alive, and if they recover with diminished reserve. I see critical illness as a state of accelerated aging. Critical illness rapidly depletes reserves. So a patient may start off like this on day one with plenty of reserve, big injury, and they end up in a situation after the first hit of requiring critical care. When they recover from this, they have depleted reserve. If they have a second injury, then they end up with recovery because of critical care, but depleted reserve again. They have another injury, more critical care, recovery with less reserve. Ultimately, any further hits, the patient cannot possibly survive. And that's why death will ensue. And when you think about this, it's important to understand that a lot of people will survive the first hit. They may survive the second hit, but then they can't survive subsequently. And the big focus in critical care research and practice over the past quarter of a century is to prevent iatrogenic complications that cause depletion of reserve and make patients vulnerable to second, third, and fourth hits, and ultimately to the patient's death. How would Porrick end up in the ICU? Well, he could end up in the ICU if he was involved in a big car crash. That's the commonest cause for a young person, or from self-harm, either physical or pharmacological, or associated with initial manifestations of metabolic diseases such as diabetic ketoacidosis, or massive or overwhelming sepsis such as meningococcemia and necrotizing fasciitis, or a deep-seated infection caused by an injury, or an iatrogenic complication of chemotherapy such as neutropenic sepsis. What about his father, Pader? Again, trauma or self-harm, all the same reasons as Porrick. Acute myocardial infarction, a heart attack, leading to cardiogenic shock. Iatrogenic causes from any sort of drugs he may be given for anything he may have a reaction, or surgical disease such as a perforated diverticulum, perforated appendix, etc. Surgical illness reflects wear and tear. For example, internal or external hernias strangulate, bowels twist around scar tissue, volvulus, diverticulate, perforate, gallstones and alcohol cause pancreatitis, aneurysms develop in the brain or abdominal cavity, aneurysms develop in the brain, abdominal aorta or thoracic aorta, and cancer requiring major surgery often requires post-operative critical care. Finally, cancer requiring major surgery and post-operative critical care, and of course post-op cardiac surgery due to vascular or valvular disease. Vulnerability to critical illness is determined by genetics, underlying reserve, and the magnitude of injury. The duration of stay depends on the speed of diagnosis and treatment. So even if the patient is vulnerable and has depleted reserve, how well they do depends a lot on how well the doctors and nurses manage that patient in the window in which they present to the general practitioner or emergency department. For example, the duration of stay that one would expect, for example, for Paddy is quite long, and it will be an undulating course. For Pader or for Podge, it would be significantly shorter. And for his younger brother, it may be very short indeed. The initial workload or the amount of critical care that the patient gets may be exactly the same, but the lower the reserve, the longer it will take the patient to recover and rehabilitate. But also, the slower the doctors and nurses are in making a diagnosis and instituting treatment, in particular the treatment of sepsis, the more likely that this is going to go on longer and longer again. And even a relatively young person who is misdiagnosed or mistreated can have a very, very long stay in critical care. Let's review this tutorial. What is really important to understand as a doctor, as a nurse, as a healthcare practitioner, is that timing matters. I'll explore this more. What's really important to understand as a doctor or a nurse or healthcare provider is that timing matters with acute illness. Now, let's review this tutorial. Mistake? Now, let's review this tutorial. In In this tutorial, I discussed why patients are admitted to critical care. I explored the concept of physiological reserve, looking at a family at different ages with different diseases going on. I explained how physiological reserve diminishes with age and with diseases, and in this tutorial, I explained why patients are admitted to critical care and introduced the concept of physiologic reserve. I explained how physiologic reserve diminishes with age and disease, and I gave examples of different diseases that deplete reserve. I also explored how duration of stay is determined by the timing of diagnosis and the timing of commencement of therapy. Timing matters. Next time, I will discuss how we can make those diagnoses quicker by using a variety of different approaches to recognize critical illness, but in particular the use of early warning scoring systems. Next time, I will discuss how we can recognize critical illness before it happens, to diagnose and treat the patients before they become so sick that they So how do we make sure that our timing is correct? Well, in the next tutorial, I will discuss how we can recognize critical illness before it even happens by using early warning scoring systems for identifying the deteriorating patient. I'll also discuss scoring systems that are used in the ICU to determine multi-organ dysfunction. I'll see you then, and I guarantee you'll learn something.